Welcome to Navigating the Vortex, a deep dive, big picture analysis of contemporary geopolitics and geoeconomics. Today, China's plans for a new world order are built on a fragile consensus. China's president, Xi Jinping, has been busy on the diplomatic front. China has just hosted the largest annual summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, followed by an impressive military parade to mark the defeat of Japan in the Second World War, all accompanied by key bilateral meetings with heads of state from like-minded countries. You could be forgiven for thinking Beijing is now the diplomatic capital of the world. But look behind the facade of bonhomie on display in the Chinese capital, and the unity underpinning a new China-led global order looks a lot more fragile than Xi Jinping would have you believe. The most important result of the SCO summit on August 31st and September 1st was not the fact that leaders adopted a lengthy communiqué and more than 20 joint statements on issues as diverse as artificial intelligence, green industries, and international trade. What mattered most was the attendance of India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, and the rapprochement between New Delhi and Beijing. This was Modi's first visit to China in 7 years. That his country's relations with China continue to improve was made clear by Modi's positive assessment of his bilateral meeting with Xi Jinping as fruitful. The Indian Prime Minister also emphasized that the bilateral relationship with China is based on mutual respect, mutual interest and mutual sensitivity, thereby acknowledging that not all of the issues between the two countries are resolved. One of these issues is the relationship with Pakistan. But as an obvious indicator of China trying to pull India closer into the SCO fold, Xi Jinping pushed for the unequivocal condemnation of the terror attacks in Pahalgam in Kashmir in April 2025 in the SCO's summit declaration. China's earlier failure to do so, as well as its support for Pakistan in the military confrontation between New Delhi and Islamabad, had soured relations with India and prevented India's defense minister from signing a similar communiqué at a meeting of SCO defense ministers in June. Modi's attendance also provided the opportunity for him and Xi Jinping to demonstrate their continuing support for Russia's President, Vladimir Putin. As far as alliances go, one between China, Russia, and India would be a formidable factor in the remaking of the international order. But while there was an impressive display of solidarity between the three leaders, they are united by little more than their opposition to the current US-dominated order. There was plenty of talk from Xi Jinping at the SCO summit about reforming the current system of international affairs, the latest blueprint of which is his Global Governance Initiative, which aims to transform the UN into a Beijing-led instrument. But the prospects of rapid change are limited. China and India are both deeply integrated into the current international financial and economic system, as are most other SCO member states and partner countries. They may all resent the current dismantling of trade relations by US tariff policies, but, with the partial exception of China's dominance of the global rare earth trade, they have little leverage. Another problem for Xi Jinping is the fact his various forays into reshaping the international system are at best complementary and at worst contradictory. There is some overlap between the SCO and his other signature project, the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. But while the BRI is global and primarily aims to extend China's influence by economic means, the SCO is much more regional in outlook and focused on security. Add to that the BRICS group, with China, Russia, and India plus Brazil and South Africa at its core, and another 5 recent joiners primarily from the Middle East and Africa, and China's approach to remaking the international system begins to look less like a coherent strategy. It resembles more a series of trial balloons, with even Xi Jinping unsure which of them will eventually pave the way to China's global leadership role. A final issue for Xi Jinping is that he is limited in his choice of partners. At the SCO summit in Tianjin, it was all about relations between China, Russia, and India. China and Russia then proceeded to finalize their long overdue agreement on the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline as part of their bilateral relationship building. At the Victory Parade in Beijing, the fledgling alliance between China, Russia and North Korea seemed to take center stage. The absence of Modi from the latter two is telling. On the one hand, relations between Moscow and Beijing are at a different level than their individual bilateral ties with New Delhi and rather exclusive, while India, on the other hand, does not want to be too closely associated with North Korea. Clearly, Xi Jinping has different options in how he pursues his challenge to the current world order, but some are mutually exclusive. Not everyone in his orbit is comfortable with all the political and economic alignments the Chinese president chooses. This is not to say that China's quest to replace the US as the global superpower is bound to fail. There is a logic to what Xi Jinping is doing. He is building a Chinese-dominated sphere of influence in Asia as a power base from which to reach for global hegemony. But outside a small circle of similarly autocratic leaders, what has propelled this project so far is less the appeal of a China-led international system than dissatisfaction with the existing liberal international order. And while this dissatisfaction predates the current incumbent of the White House, it has been aggravated over the first 6 months of Donald Trump's second term as U.S. president. More than 2 decades of careful recalibration of U.S. relations with India, including drawing New Delhi into an alliance pushing back against China in Asia, appear recently to have been sacrificed at the altar of Trump's insatiable vanity. When India failed to acknowledge his claim to have mediated in its row with Pakistan after the Pahalgam terror attack and declined to join Pakistan in nominating Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize, his response was to rekindle relations with Pakistan and impose punitive tariffs on India. Simultaneously, Trump's wholly misguided America First foreign policy has undermined the very relationships in Europe and Asia that underpinned the liberal international order and secured U.S. dominance within it. At least his latest insight, that China, Russia and North Korea conspire against the United States, gives a glimmer of hope for America's concerned allies in the West that the U.S. president will change course in how he deals with Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang. But such hopes may be futile as there is little indication that Trump has given up on his vision of a new international order dominated by great powers who are firmly in control of their individual spheres of influence. If Trump doesn't recognize the value of his country's allies in managing the challenge that China clearly poses to the U.S., and not just the liberal international order that he seems to detest as much as Xi Jinping and Putin and their autocratic allies, China's sphere of influence may quickly extend far beyond Asia. This could relegate the U.S. to a second-order power confined to, but not necessarily secure in, a diminishing sphere of influence and leave Europe to fend for itself. Far from ushering in a new era of stability that Donald Trump, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin all claim to desire, this could mark the beginning of a new period of great power rivalry not unlike the most tense moments of the Cold War. A big thank you to all of our readers, listeners, followers and subscribers. Signing up to the newsletter is the best way to make sure you don't miss out on anything, and you'll get our newsletter and podcast delivered straight to your inbox wherever you are in the world. Importantly, you'll also be able to read the full written version of all of our pieces, which gives all of the background links to the information we cite in case you want to dive deeper and, like us, like to look at primary sources and check your facts. You can register for free at navigatingthevortex.com. You can also subscribe for subscriber-only access to comments and chats and other special subscriber-only benefits. You can find all these details in the podcast show notes as well. We hope you'll share Navigating the Vortex with anyone you think might find it of interest. If you like the show, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening.